The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition webinar on riding the roller coaster of remote learning. I'm Julie Silverbrook, Senior Director of Growth Initiatives at iCivics, and I will be kicking us off this morning. Please note that today's program will be recorded and will be available for all of you to enjoy afterward and to share. All questions should be posed through the chat window, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. You can pose questions throughout the presentation, and we will then pose those during the Q&A session later on toward the end of the webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's session, David Buchanan, Director of Massachusetts Programs at iCivics, and our fabulous presenter, Andrew Swan, a veteran grade 8 teacher with Newton Public Schools. With that, I'll let Dave take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome and thanks for joining us this morning. As Julie just said, we'll start with the major presentation. We'll be moving into some time at the end of the session for question and answer, some discussion with Andrew, and then wrap up. So this session is hosted by the Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition. iCivics is a member of the organization, among many other organizations. And the coalition was organized about 3 years ago, particularly to make sure that all students across the Commonwealth were receiving a quality and effective civics education program. The coalition was very instrumental in the passage of the new state civics law and has been very influential in continuing to advocate for continued funding, as well as other policy decisions to support civic education across the state. Most recently, in reaction to the COVID-19 health crisis, we've been really trying to pay attention to what educators really need in this moment. And as part of that effort, we've established a new section on our website, the resources for educators, students, and families, which is specifically designed for this particular moment in time. As the name implies here, it provides resources not only for educators, but also for students and families, as well as providing some general information related to the health crisis. And you'll find when you dig into these that we've organized them by topic, as well as by grade level, so that we've attempted to make these materials as usable as possible and to make them as supportive of all of your efforts out there in the field working with your students. So we thank you for your service, and we're certainly hoping that this resource center will be helpful to you. So with that, I'm going to move along and pass it on over to Andrew to dig right into the main presentation. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Hi, everybody. Just getting through a little bit about the rest of us. I'm trying to do that good, some of those good educator things while I still remember all these. So here's my general kind of agenda, so the plan and kind of try to end where we're beginning here with some just check-ins, reality checks. So I'm going to cover the difference I see between synchronous and asynchronous. Frankly, I lean toward the asynchronous, but there are definitely some good together time things like we're doing right now. I've got some things I've learned about organizing and how not to organize and communicate. I'm going to try to end on a positive note as well with some possibilities that can emerge from things. But actually, the very first thing I want to do before I really get to my agenda, again, it's such a weird kind of thing to be doing this remotely, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So let's see if this works. I'm going to switch over to a different window. There we go. And I'm going to use a tool called Mentimeter, which I assure you I'm not compensated in any way by this company. So if you've used one of these before, you can go at the very top. It tells you the web address. And if you are using a different device, that's probably the easiest. This is something I use with my students, and I wanted to share with you. You can also use a different tab on the browser you're on right now. And when it asks for the code, it's right there, that 6-digit code 506731. And I'm going to leave this up for at least a minute or so. What you're going to see is these little dots. As people vote, we're going to actually visually get instant feedback on these, I guess it's a kind of a survey. So we have one person already who is identified as a middle school teacher, but I believe we have many more folks out there. I understand that some of you won't be able to, again, with the device that you have, you may have some limitations. Again, my students end up with these as well. But I'll share some strategies of how I've used this as we go. So, all right, we got these little globs of mostly Massachusetts. And maybe you're already thinking about how you could use something like this with your own students, either in real time like this, or perhaps before a synchronous session together. It can work either way. But I just love the way that these things like glob together like this. And so, I could have done this as like a bar graph or a pie chart or something, but I don't know. There's just something about these little bubbles that I find very endearing. So thanks for humoring me with this. I'm going to move off this screen in a moment, but you're definitely still free to vote. And what this has helped me, and again, it can help you as an educator, I know a bit more about my audience now. I know most of you are like me in Massachusetts. I teach 8th grade, like many of you are in middle school. I'm at Bigelow Middle School in Newton. I've been there for 16 years. And I have 2 high school age students. I live in Waltham, so I can speak to those. All right. Thank you, folks who have voted, are voting. I know it only lets you vote once. If you made a mistake, you're stuck with it. But I'll have more of these. So if you're using a different browser or device or something, keep that open because we're going to pop back to this. Again, if there's more voting, that's cool and fine. I'm going to do some reality checks, and I've got 3 of them just again to kind of get the groundwork in place here. This is the classic Bloom's taxonomy, and we're struggling, right? We're struggling especially with these higher ones. How am I supposed to do this higher order thinking? All those projects and cool things that you usually do. In fact, we may be just struggling with the bottom of that, of the pyramid there, just trying to get kids to learn and remember and understand some things. But remember, there's also the Maslow hierarchy of needs, also can be arranged like a pyramid. And part of why we're struggling is because here's our reality check. This is that pyramid that kids need to be climbing first. And frankly, a lot of us as adults as well. And actually, I love this one too, where someone rewrote it with like Wi-Fi is the base of everything, which is perhaps a barely debatable statement at this point. So really, the way I want to think of it is, there's the Maslow, and if you've heard like the Maslow before Bloom's, Bloom's is up at the very top. It would be great to get all the way to the top, but we have all these basic things to do first. And keeping that in mind, I think, is really important. And how to do all this remotely, how to get that love that we have for our students across, make sure they're safe, that they have shelter and all that, and that they feel like they can do things before they can actually learn. So let's keep that in mind. That's reality check number 1. Number 2, before we get too far on here, here's a map of the variety of Massachusetts districts. And I've told you where I am, and most of you are in this state as well. But even within this state, there's a lot of diversity. And there's no way that what I can convey today is going to fit exactly your situation. In fact, even within schools, there could be differences from grade to grade and so forth. So that's one of our reality checks. Oh, right, the Wi-Fi thing. Again, that's going to be another difference between our communities. Where I teach, it's pretty well widespread in Newton, as perhaps you can imagine, but not completely. I mean, there is some diversity, even within Newton, that I experience as well. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. And that's really forcing us to rethink about like what homework really is and what classwork really means now. And again, that's going to be different from school to school and certainly district to district. That's just the reality. And third one, again, you have to humor me here. I'm a gifts guy, but this is probably how many of you are feeling. Well, at least one of these, kind of like we're like, all right, we can rally just barely, but we're doing okay right up until we're not. Or just that general kind of flat, okay, we're kind of getting through here. Sort of echoes a bit back to the Maslow piece. And I also think of this, maybe this also shows it, but that Zeno's paradox of like the frog or the person that keeps getting halfway to the wall, but never actually gets there. Sometimes that's like a math thing about asymptotes. But what we're really struggling, right, is like no one knows how to do this. So I just want to get that reality check out there at first. I'm just a guy who's been teaching for a while and has been doing some of these things for a while and made some mistakes, but I do not have all the answers. And again, some things I'm going to say may not frankly apply to your situation, but I'm going to try to get across for everyone. So those are my disclaimers at the beginning here. All right, so all that being said, let me just get right into some of the meat of this. So there are things we could do synchronously, like what we're doing now, where everyone's accessing at the same time with a live instructor. If you're watching this right now, you get that instant kind of feedback, like the little Mentimeter thing we're able to do, or what I will get to later, with you get to ask me a question on time. And that's a chance for some of those real-time connections. Asynchronous, again, just reviewing real quickly, right, that's what it could be anytime. So if you're watching this recorded, that's asynchronous, and it's not just video, and I'll get to some more of this later. There are some other ways to do asynchronous learning, but it has that pacing, that self-pacing, and it's generally going to be more convenient. But there are problems with each of these, as I'm sure you probably discovered or seen. So I want to try to get through some of those as we go here. Now, this is where we could pause and maybe discuss, and I could solicit some from the audience, but maybe just in the interest of time, we're just going to kind of forge forward here. I'm going to start with the synchronous. Again, that's what the kind of thing we're doing now. This is how I started. This is was my first one I did back at kind of the beginning of what all this is. I tried to make a screen when my students were in, my 20-something students in social studies showing up. This is like what I would have on the whiteboard behind me in the classroom or as students came in. And I'm just like, I don't recommend this anymore. You can't make this like a regular kind of class. I sort of clung to that for too long. It's just too different. Now, maybe we could debate this later on in the webinar here, but I think that's some of what maybe is messing some of us up. We got to do other things. And also, this is my reality now. I don't know what yours is, but this was my schedule yesterday. I had, out of my 4 sections, I had 25 minutes with them. And then they shifted to their next English or science or math class. So it's 2 straight hours on the computer. And then tomorrow I got this again on Thursday morning, starting at 11 until 1. So that's my situation. So we get this whole Brady Bunch thing here, which is, just think about this for teenagers. This is their worst nightmare, right? We always tell, like, they always think that people are looking, people are looking at me, people are judging me, but now they actually are, right? In a classroom, everyone's usually looking parallel or just within groups, but it's actually what's happening now when they're in the whole grid. It's a lot to be able to handle. I've definitely used the waiting rooms feature in Zoom or like whatever other ones you have. For one thing, you can avoid this kind of thing. I'm sorry if this offends anyone. This is a real screenshot from a real one, and gosh, golly, I'm glad I didn't let that other person in before they changed their name, because kids are great, right? Kids are going to try to find their own ways through this. I definitely, if you haven't yet, if you're going to do synchronous sessions, some kind of etiquette. I got this from Stacy Young, a 7th grade teacher in California. She had this a 2-part thing. Just getting those, just like you would do in a classroom, right? You're, in a way, it's like the beginning of the year again. You have to set those protocols, those routines, and enforce them. And figure out how you want to do these. I added a couple extra ones though that I sort of hinted about before, beyond what Stacy Young has. You want to work this out, but I let students tilt the camera, so have it tilted so you can only see like the top of their head, but at least I know they exist. But you can work. You just need to be consistent with whatever you're coming up with. About the virtual backgrounds, or if they have the profile pics, we had some things with that early on. Remember, again, kids are going to find whatever it is, and they've got all week to think of what these things might be, right? So you want to set these standards. And then the last one, again, is only real name, not JJ Coxmel. We don't want that. Again, just like you wouldn't let kids have like stickers or name tags on their desk that were inappropriate. So you cannot presume that they know any of these things. So if you haven't done that yet, that's maybe one thing that could really help any of your synchronous things. Another thing that I've done is an exit ticket. So quite honestly, I don't always keep them for the full 25 minutes. That may not be something you're able to do, but For many students, I've let them go early. So this was one strategy I used last week. I showed students a link to a Google form and let them fill it out. They had to show me they understood the directions that I had explained, type them in, and then as I saw the responses coming in on the Google Sheet spreadsheet, I could call them out and say, wait, James, you need to fix this up, or I could type privately in the chat, so that by the end of the session, I knew every kid, or I knew at least at that time, that every student had explained understood the directions of what they would need to do beyond that synchronous time. Because if you're frustrated that you're getting weird stuff, kids didn't follow the directions, this could be a way, this is what that synchronous time could really be helpful for, to catch those errors before they actually happen. And that was almost 100% successful. Here's another one, and I'm going to zoom through this. Zoom. I'm going to go through this really fast because I can come back to it. But some things we've done, we had a no hats and hoods rule at school. Well, now you have to wear a hat and a hood on Thursday, tomorrow, to your Zoom sessions. Again, just a little something kind of different. Kids actually asked for this one. Can I bring a pet? It could be a stuffed animal, but just something for at least some of the time. We did a little scavenger hunt. My English teacher colleague did one of these, like, all right, go find a pair of glasses, or different pair of glasses, and bring them, and gets kids at least moving too, like makes it a bit more dynamic of an experience. And this is something we did also. We did a little trivia contest about teachers and read out some statements at a time. And then at the last one, we told them the answers. Again, just little kinds of things to kind of mix things up. Breakout rooms are another way that I've found to be really helpful to get kids into smaller groups, because again, the huge Brady Bunch grid is a lot for you to process, as well for them to actually navigate as well. So putting them into some kinds of groups, they'll see a little window like this. It's like sending kids out to around the classroom. So if you haven't tried this strategy, again, yes, you're leaving them alone in this digital space, and that, but again, unless your admin says no, as always, right? If the admin doesn't say no, then you can try it. So see if that's something that works for you. And the Mentimeter. So that was something else that I was demonstrating earlier. And as you can maybe imagine, let's do another one of those. Actually, I'm going to switch over again, partly because I've been talking for about 12 minutes or so, and this is a good chance for a little bit of a breather. So let's see if this works. That's the one we had before, and we can see the final results. Actually, I have a couple of these set up. So let's try this one. So we got the different, remember I'm a graphic interface format kind of person here. So you can pick more than one. So we can watch and see as people vote, if you're still on that device as before. We got a lot of curious people. We've got 9 votes so far. No one's feeling neutral. Everyone seems to be feeling something. Oh, there's that one person right there. And it is a tie right now. My God, Exhausted seems to be pulling up into the lead. Oh my gosh, Curious just came out of nowhere. And now we have, it seems to be a 2-horse race between Exhausted and Curious. Of course, these are not mutually exclusive. You might have people who feel both of these at the same time. The Curious girl just collapsing onto the desk there. We have some motivation. That's always good to see. We'd like more, but that's, I guess, what we've got right now. Maybe motivated to do what is what you're wondering. And now here we are with about half of us feeling curious. And of course, that leaves me wondering, what are you curious about? Now, actually, the little like play-by-play thing I was doing is something I also do while these votes are coming in. Oh, here comes neutral. Because we don't get sports anymore, right? There's no live sports to speak of. So this is the closest we get to actually observing a competition in real time. And again, middle schoolers get into it. I did one of these with like favorite pets or best kind of pet. And kids were unmuting, like yelling out, vote porcupine, vote unicorn. Quite have that interactivity here. But again, this is something you could do at the beginning, kind of do in the middle like I just did. I've used other ones, and maybe I can show you some more later on, to just that sort of dipsticking that you would like do in the classroom. And it breaks things up. It breaks things up. So, because talking for the whole time doesn't work. I'm not doing it now, and it's probably not going to work with your students either. So yeah, okay, yeah, this is that one I mentioned that I did with students before. Okay, so there's some cool things with that. I personally prefer the asynchronous. So this is that survey that I mentioned earlier, that Google form I had students do. But I'd actually recorded those directions. If you were wondering from before, like what were the directions they were supposed to get, I did not deliver those directions in real time. So when I sent them away, this was one of the things I'd recorded. And yes, I used a goofy, actually I used a bunch of backgrounds. This is a Minecraft one. It's like a 4-minute video. It's what I would have said to them directly. I'm not gonna play it for you right now because you don't care what those directions were anyway. And it probably wouldn't play very well. But these were some directions that they could get during the Zoom session, and they had to come back to show me did they understand it. I could have done this all asynchronously, honestly, though. But I found that this kind of thing, and again, as you see, like I've got the green screen set up here. I have had some experience making videos before. This is actually how I usually do my direct instruction, the flipped classroom model you may have heard of, or blended learning. So that's helped me somewhat, but anyone can make these kinds of things. So here's one I made, and I used like a picture of my classroom so it looked like I was still there. But you can do screencasts also. I'll come back to this in a moment. Oh, I did one about iCivics. There's your iCivics thing, David and Julie. There you go. To show students how to play one of the games before I had them actually doing that. So again, it doesn't have to be your face on the screen. If you're not cool with that, fine. You really don't need to, because that's not necessarily what they need. There are different video creation tools. This is not a tech webinar, so I'm just going to kind of zoom through these, partly just to show you the variety of things that you can do. I'd make a lot of mine with just Google Slides, and I'm just narrating my way through those things. So again, I can come back to this later if you want to know. But again, it doesn't have to be videos. This is something I've showed my students early on in this COVID, coronacation, whatever we call this. And I tried to give students variety. This is when I was doing enrichment review things before I started teaching new stuff. So I had some links to these. Mr. Betts, social studies middle school teachers. I'm sure you know Mr. Betts by now. And you're probably mesmerized by that screen right there. So let's move on. I gave iCivics games as an example. Here's my other iCivics mention here. I made a course, let students go, and then I had them challenging to try to get a certain number of points. That was motivating for many of them early on, and that's certainly something you could try. You know, since we're not doing grades, and for I would say quite many good reasons, but trying to get them to reach a certain number of points as your standard of success. Maybe try that. And again, it doesn't have to be videos or even on a screen at all. Podcasts are a screenless option. Civics 101 is one of my favorites for my discipline. If you're not sure, then they're just north of us in New Hampshire Public Radio. Here are some of the episode topics. So there's probably something that fits what you're doing if you're doing anything, especially US or civics. But there are lots of other podcasts too. Ben Franklin's Worlds. Again, I'm focusing mostly social studies here. So probably some of these you've heard of. Again, some of them are overly long, perhaps. Maybe it's just options. But think about that for folks who are struggling with screen access. Podcasts they could have on their phone, get a Stitcher app or something like that, and that could be a way to go. Another one is I mentioned modules. So what my students have been doing the past 3 weeks, we're using Checkology. This is from the News Literacy Project. So my 8th grade Massachusetts teacher friends out there, this is topic 7, those new prerequisite power standards we have now. Topic 7, all those free press ones, you were like, how the heck am I going to get to those? Checkology, again, not compensated in any way. What's cool about this is it's got videos and things built in. So this is one of the ones my students did earlier about bias in the news. And then it has built-in questions, and some of them they have to get the right answer before they move onward. So it's that self-paced kind of work. I get timestamp reports. I can look and see when students are doing it. Some of them are doing this like 11 o'clock, midnight. I'm asleep. I'm too old. But this is when they're, getting to them when they're ready is, well, that's one way to go. And you have open response things as well. If you don't like the open response things and those kinds of modules, I've used Google Forms for that as well to show me that they got it. So I've got the example here. And oops, I should blur out. There we go. You saw no names. I get these kinds of reports as well. Again, Checkology is not the only one. I'm sure there are other kind of self-graded things out there. And I've also showed you this one to show not all my students are rocking it out. I mean, I'm having a lot of success and many students, but that one in the middle, it's not quite working for everybody. At least it wasn't by then. Before I move on from asynchronous, think about what your students can do, how they don't have to just report or show their learning during synchronous sessions, which can be really awkward in that kind of Zoom environment. Flipgrid, which has nothing to do with like flipped classroom really. This is one a student made, a little snapshot of something a student made before. They can submit video responses or even audio responses. Again, they don't have to have their face on the screen. I had students do it like get on screen and do it like puppets, which is fabulous actually. I love that one. So again, like ways that they can produce things without needing to get paragraphs all the time. I'm borrowing this from Eric Peterson, who shared this during an SS chat, a Twitter chat a couple weeks ago. He did an Andrew Jackson project and gave students choice of responses. Again, writing full paragraph things might not be where our guys are at. My own son has a 5-page history paper junior year. It's been a slog, but if they can report in other ways, oh my God, maybe TikTok, maybe bite the bullet and let them try that. Memes. How can memes do well? This was from Melissa Filikowski, also on Twitter. I found this one, so she deserves credit. Can be kind of like that Mentimeter thing. I've also used it for students to show their understanding. Again, Google form or something else. For students, I give them the template, and then they have to put a good caption, and you can get some really amazing stuff. Here we have a Hamill fan here. So this is not one I did recently, I should say, but back when I was doing history, right? Even Constitution, Jean-Luc can express so many things. So just other things to kind of think about. I'll move on to organization, and again, I just have a few slides left because I know we're going to get to questions, but I showed a little version of this before. This was my early stage. I was using Google Docs. Actually, my earliest stage, I was using our LMS. We use Schoology at my school. And I figured out pretty early that parents cannot access those. Maybe your Google Classrooms, if you're using those. I wanted a Google Doc that parents could see as well. So this is a way I tried to organize things, have some hyperlinks in there. It's a lot to look at all at once. So, but having everything in one place, is one way. I adapted that a couple weeks later, and I used a different color background for each one, so I could say, now we're on the yellow Google Doc. Last week we were the blue Google Doc. And again, I gave a little intro at the beginning, putting a little like checklist things for students to do. I encourage them to print this out if they possibly could and check things off as they did them. That's just so satisfying because remember, they're not handing in papers anymore. They don't get that tangible feeling of completion in this digital remote learning world, but giving them lists they can cross things off, feel accomplished. Again, having it all in one place, having as few extra documents as possible, really, really helpful. And nailing down when they need to be done. That's really helped me as well. That's another thing that I learned. Again, going back, I was so general about here, just do these things. But when? And again, we know many of our students are going to leave it as late as possible. So if I tell them, need to do it before we have that synchronous meeting, now that has some bite. Maybe that's too strong, right? But it has some urgency, some impetus to get the things done before they have to look me in the eye and they know I know they haven't done it. This is where my school's at now. This took like a while, but working with some other teachers, at my school, we developed this way of having all teachers within the whole team one-stop shopping, so they don't just have to go to my page and then the math page and then the English page. I know this is hard at high school, but for you middle schoolers, if you haven't done this, I can't say enough about getting your whole team's material together. If you've already done it, then you're awesome. You're already onto this. You don't need to hear all this. So just sort of zooming in again, those little like check boxes of what folks can do. Again, parents can see this as well. We have this on a website, and I can share the link later if you think that's going to be helpful. It's just a Google site with the documents embedded. There's sort of like a window to the documents. So we only have to update the Google Doc, and we do that once a week, like late Sunday night or early Monday morning. So every week students see something new. And my daughter's actually Waltham High. She has a group of teachers who've been doing this as well, and it was awesome. I actually kind of stole their idea, Changemaker Academy. And then if you look up at the top, they can go to different things for like their different teachers, world language teachers. It's all in one place. This took us a few weeks, and it was some work, but we're riding that wave all the way through now. And since this might be our reality in the next school year, we don't want to talk about that yet, but having things all in one place would really, really help. Last things I really want to just communication. I've been doing surveys to students, asking them things like this. Found out that most of them were actually getting to sleep before midnight, which pleasantly surprised me. And most of them were up before 9, but there are some outliers. And I think sometimes the data was helpful for me, but students just like being asked or getting asked this kind of question. And you can ask this so many different ways. Again, a lot of Google Forms for me, but it doesn't have to be like that. Again, the data helps me to see, oh, this was from about 3 weeks ago. Students felt like their family was okay, but those number 2 votes, those are ones we needed to focus on. So getting that kind of information really helps. Probably the best thing I've done, if you've stuck with this webinar so long, then great. Probably one of the best things I've been doing that's had the most success is just writing emails to students, and sometimes even calling up families. That communication, it takes time, but I've had some real so these are just some of the ones I've put in here. Just having that, and then you'll see some of them are a little bit similar. I'm doing a little bit of copying and pasting, but these are students who, they're not always my rock star students, frankly. My high flyers are going to keep going, right? I mean, honestly, like the ones who want to keep are motivated. That these are the ones who also aren't in a special ed program. These are the ones I'm prioritizing. In the time that I've got in the day, these bubble kids who might otherwise have dropped away, I'm trying to talk them up in these messages here, and they're still with us 2 weeks later. So I, again, can't say enough about doing that kind of thing. Just asking them, keeping that communication open. They don't reply, okay? Don't expect a heartfelt response necessarily, although I've gotten a couple. But I know they got them, and that's helped as well. I might come back to that in a bit, but I do just want to sort of, again, kind of, what good news. This just sounds like a lot of work. And we're going to try to make lemonade out of this, whatever kind of lemonade it is that we might need here. So one thing you may not have considered is the potential for getting guest speakers. Again, social studies teachers, there are professors who are more available perhaps than they used to be, your historical society nearby. Getting a journalist, civics teachers, your local rep is stuck at home. They're not at the State House. So I blurred this out. I actually got a Zoom session with Kay Khan, my student's local rep. I circled her and tried to blur out the students' faces. And then last week, because I'm doing this stuff about journalism, I got Andrea Shea from WBUR Public Radio to talk about my students about her kind of experience, because they're also learning how to be reporters. And we did this like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can't get guest speakers at 4 o'clock like in regular kind of school. Give that a try. Also, what I'm going for here is, what am I talking about here? Crossovers, crossover events. Again, we're so locked in regular school to, you're the social studies teacher, and I know many of you are middle school and maybe you already do some crossovers, but there's some potential here for connecting with ELA. That's what I'm doing with some of this work about journalism, is enforcing some of the things he'd already taught them about propaganda. I was talking to my science teacher colleague earlier today about things we can do as we're rounding out the year here. Maybe some fine arts connections as well, depending on your topic. There are ways, right? Like you can run a Zoom together with like the music teacher. When can you do that in regular school? But that's the kind of thing that might be possible here. So winding back here, let's go backwards. So here's how we were feeling earlier on. Hopefully you're starting to feel like, okay, like maybe, right? Like there's some possible ways of kind of getting through this. Remember, nobody's done this before. Nobody knows. So let's make this happen, right? Like no one's done this, but there are ways, there are things we can do, and maybe reaching out together. Again, there's all this diversity within Massachusetts. Wi-Fi is an unavoidable issue, like in terms of tech kind of connections. But if you target your efforts, like I was saying at the beginning, right? Like rethink, well, what does homework have to be? Do I even have to be still doing homework? Do we have to be doing classwork synchronously? Really targeting your efforts so you're not pulling your hair out trying to solve all these things, because that's so hard. And it's still going to be hard, but targeting might actually end up helping. And we can't forget our things here. So it's those connections. I really wanted to underscore that piece. The connections, the importance of those, however you're able to make those happen. And sometimes just trying. It may not feel quite successful, but giving that a try. Because I think out of all this, tech tools and so forth, that's probably been what's been the most successful for me. And I think that's where I'm going to close out and make sure we get some time for the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Andrew. That was awesome. We do have a couple of questions, and I invite people to send more as we go. This one is from Hugo Smith, and he wants to know how you get the kids to talk to each other. He has 8th grade students, and he feels that they're just not talking to each other. They don't want to.
That is definitely something I've struggled with as well. Like I had that 2-hour marathon yesterday, and I've got another one tomorrow, and that's some of what I'm thinking about. Some of those things I was showing earlier, which maybe I can figure out which slides those were and pop back to. Sorry, I don't know the numbers of my own slides. So some of these kinds of things here, like to bring an animal. One girl had a flying squirrel. Like, what? What's a flying squirrel? And we just talked about that for like 3 or 4 minutes. Was it about civics? No, not even close. But some of it's just they don't know how. And I think that's some of what us adults had to figure out too. It's like the verbal car crashes of like when someone's talking and someone else, and how do I unmute myself? Like some of them don't know how to do that yet. So there's a technical piece to it as well. I assume, Hugo, when you're asking this, these are students who, I presume these are students who used to talk together more in the classroom, because if they weren't talking before, they're probably not going to be talking much now. My section 1 is just clams up still. My 3 and 4 are a bit more so. But just giving them something to talk about. Again, something fun. My gosh, like those sessions, they wanted to go longer talking about these things here. So if you find those hooks, and that may mean going non-curricular for like maybe even a week, maybe multiple ones of these, it's not wasted time. It can pay off later on. And again, this is probably some things you were doing in September. So trying to dust off those things in this digital form. So I hope that's a helpful answer. But it's something I do struggle with too. So I don't have all the answers.
So this is a question from Louise Dubé, Executive Director of iCivics. How many students show up for the remote sessions every week on average?
I probably should have led with that. I had 97%. 97%. I had 3 students not show up before yesterday, and 2 of them, one of them emailed me during, and one of them emailed me right after. My math teacher colleague actually said she had 100%. So but that's been a lot of work with my team. It's not just been me. That was a lot of work from all of us from early on, of reaching out to parents back in March, checking in, making sure they had like tech access and so on. And we're going to ride this out as long as we can. But yeah, I probably should have mentioned that earlier. I know a lot of teachers are not having such success. And again, I think some of the things like I've got on the screen, like just getting some of those carrots, some of those hooks to bring kids in will grow that population.
Great. This is a question from Lisa Kapp. Can you clarify on the one-stop shop? Each member of the team puts all assignments for each class on a single Google Doc?
Yeah, so let me again zip through my own stuff about yes. So there's this Google Doc right here, and yep. So these are my 3 teacher colleagues for science, math, and English, and we have one document that we have hidden. We have a copy of this document that we add to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe as late as Sunday, and then we just do a copy and paste. We just copy and dump the new stuff on there. We have kids at like 9, 10 p.m. on Sunday asking like, where's the new stuff? And then again, it's got all the links right there. And I also like it because I'll sometimes update it a little bit over the course of the week. If I want to make a little change, like you see the little note on mine, like unavailable until Tuesday. But of course, after Tuesday, I changed that up. So I hope that's answering your question, Lisa. We all have access to that document. And then up at the top, you see the special education and guidance counselor can also put their links up there as well. So it's more of like a team approach, team communication. And then it's on the website like this.
Great. So we have a question now from Jason Pelledge, which is, beyond your 2 days of 2-hour blocks of office hours, how much more of teacher time is required to attend meetings? I find it harder to do more as I'm in various meetings over the week.
Yeah, I have, well, I've got, we're doing this until 12. I have a meeting with my content partner and special education teachers at 2 o'clock today. But we also always have a meeting, me and my content partner, we meet a little bit before the meeting. It's gotten better than it was back in March. It was just all kinds of ad hoc meetings coming along. I have a team meeting with my, all the folks whose names you see right there. My principal attends that one, our teaching assistants, that's Fridays, so that's just once a week. Which actually I should say is actually a little bit more often than we used to meet. We were on a 6-day rotating schedule, so there could be a week where we didn't meet. It's kind of nice having at least once a week. And beyond that, I'm sure I'm forgetting one. Not too many, actually, I have to say, but we're doing a lot of in-between meetings. So again, with my team, we have a text thread that's probably 300 pages long, of just sticking to, collaborating, talking together. And we do little unofficial meets as well. But officially, I guess it's just those 2 extra ones for me.
So there's 2 questions from Jennifer Clifford. We'll start with number 1, which is wondering if your Zoom meetings are mandatory.
The M word. So actually on this document that we're looking at right now, it used to say up at the top, we had language, office hours are optional, but strongly recommended. And my principal actually said, our school committee said not to use the word optional. So we just changed it to office hours are strongly recommended. So that may be another thing that's different from district to district. So, all right, just speaking for myself, I think mandatory is not really a word that we can use for any of this because there are so many caveats. And again, I'm talking about a community where you're hearing Newton, you're like, ooh, Newton. There is diversity, but generally, yeah, we could pretty well count on students and families having access to, maybe they'll buy an extra laptop or extra internet access. But we don't know what any family situation is. I have one student who is the only one in his house. His older sibling and his parents have COVID-19. He's in his room. He has food brought to his door, and he has to call out before going out to the bathroom or something. He's handling it amazingly well, but and that's just one that I know about. Sorry. The families don't have to tell us their situations. So I want them to, and we're trying to make it worth their time when they do come. But so it's not officially mandatory. I'm not going to, I'm going to check in with kids who don't come rather than try to make it punitive or gather points or something like that.
Thanks, Andrew. Jen also wanted to know, obviously the webinar is being recorded, so people will have access to your slides through that, but if you would be willing to make the PowerPoint so people can actually go in and take a deeper look at the slides, if you're also open to that as well.
Yeah, I'll do a better job. There are a couple of students' names in there that I caught during the presentation, so I'll be a little better about that. So give me a little bit to make sure I can cleanse through that one more time. But yeah, I don't mind.
This is from Sarah Kala. She teaches grade 8. We did some team meets that were really small, team teachers and 3 students. Now we have moved up to 3 to 9 kids. It helped us and is helping the kids. The smaller groups and slow increase has helped. Next, we are doing a whole class. Wish us luck. The 3 team teachers help us to see all of the kids. So just sharing her experience. Todd Monroe has a question. Looking ahead to the next school year, which is anxiety producing for everyone I know, what tech implementation would you first prioritize for setting up with your team to help streamline norms?
Norms. I presume you're thinking about like sort of online. Well, norms could go a lot of different ways. I mean, one thing, like the first thing where the question was going, I think we need to keep doing this. What we have what I have on the screen here of showing like all the classes all in one place. We have that in place now. I think this should just be the standard. It says distance learning in the corner. This should just be the standard, I think, for my school, and why not for every middle school. The why not was probably how much time it would take to do, but we've put that time in. So I think that would be something to maintain. In terms of norms, if you're thinking about like things like the how to be on Zoom together kind of norms, if I find my slides about that, these are ones we did come to agreement about. There we go. Like these things, we had to be all on the same page about the camera thing. Now, yeah, there are a couple of them I'm wondering about as we've done more of this, especially like the camera thing, and the virtual backgrounds. Kids somehow some kids can actually still do it, even though I thought I had it disabled. So yeah, I think these are some of those kinds of conversations we can have, not in like emergency, immediate, we have to solve this, you know, and agree before tomorrow kind of way that we frankly made these decisions. So that's a really good point. I think as much as it's school-wide or team-wide or grade-wide as possible, so it's not just Mr. Swan's stupid world. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I haven't put enough thought ahead into that for next year. But collaboration and connection is going to be the key between all of us. Even if we disagree, we'll have to compromise.
So those are all of the questions from the group. If anybody else has questions they'd like to pose, feel free to do that now. Oh, actually, no, Carolyn Gold has a question. Sorry, Carolyn, we missed you. She is having difficulty in getting her students into her iCivics classes, and I was wondering if you had advice on that.
So again, zoom into one of those things I've shown before. Here we go. So if you haven't yet making the class, some kids struggle like a little bit in terms of getting in and finding the code. I think some of that was just executive function of finding where things were. And again, I could do a better job now of, I would actually, when we're doing this, I wasn't doing the synchronous thing. So that's where I would keep them in the Zoom session until I know that they're in my course. So that would be one step. And the advantage of having them in an iCivics class is that you can monitor, that's a judgy kind of word. So you can you can observe their progress as they're going. I like doing the points. Another thing I've done in like regular school, is have students assign them playing a game for a certain number of minutes, not just getting to the end. Games like I think of like Lawcraft, for example, depending which law they pick, and just there's some luck of the draw in that game. So kids could win the game, suddenly pass their law in 6 minutes. And I learned that it's better to give them a certain amount of time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, play it a couple of times if they won right away, and then talk about it. So then that might be another way, is like have them do some kind of reflection piece as a Google form or some other kind of way to submit it. Or it gives you something to talk about in the synchronous time if you're having that. Like, well, how did you win? Oh, I won this way. Oh, I didn't know that was the possibility. Which law did you have? Like, and that can go back to Hugo's point, I think it was earlier, about how do you get them talking? You know, have them in a parallel task asynchronously. That gives them something to talk about. And frankly, who doesn't want to talk about a game? There are some kids, but generally you're going to have kids having something to say. And you know, that one kid who scored like 5,000 points. How'd you get 5,000 points? That's not possible. You know, did you hack? Maybe there is a hack, and they can share the hack. So some of that brings a couple of things together, I think. But just telling them, go play this game. Again, I've tried that, and it gets some kids, but adding some of these extra things, I think, will maybe get you more of what you're trying to get.
A follow-up question from Susan Gaffney, which is, would you please clarify where the class code comes from iCivics?
So that happens. I made that class a while ago, but when you make your account, your teacher account, and then you create a class, it's there's some button about like inviting students or adding students that gives you that code, and I believe it's the last name of a Supreme Court justice and then some random number there. And the students only ever have to do that once they've entered the code. And I believe, sorry, I have like so many apps running together, but I think with iCivics, it is, or you can help me with this, Julie or David, it's a Google account connected now, right?
I think that's right. And
Yeah, that's correct, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really helps. The G Suite, right? That once they made it, then they're in. So every time they come into iCivics.org, they don't need a new password or something like they used to.
For folks who have, so Caroline said, LOL, I just can't get them into my iCivics classes, which might be a incentive issue. But for people who have technical questions, please feel free to email me or David, and we can help answer those technical questions. Now, we do have a couple of other questions that have come around, which is, can you speak more about how you got buy-in from colleagues to set up the schedule you shared and to establish norms sort of across curricular areas?
Well, the schedule that I showed, like that didn't come from me, the 25 minutes per class, that was administrator determined. And it got us through, I think we started that early April, last week of March. You know, time kind of runs together. But it was relatively early in the process. And the purpose was making sure that only 8th grade, my cluster is on there. So if kids have like sibling, I don't know. It was the principles like thing that he came up with. I find 25 minutes is both too long and too short. So we might within our team rejigger that. I was actually, again, talking with my science teacher colleague about something about that. So getting buy-in, again, I mean, some of this, a lot of this is like a civics thing. That's just where my brain goes. A lot of this is a civics project in real action, right? This is your action civics right here is, you know, how do we solve this problem? And, you know, what causes can we, what are the root causes that we can actually address? That's just where kind of where my brain goes. So it's going to take some compromise. I mean, there's some things my team's like that. I'm like, okay, they want to do a video, a hype video, like lip syncing that Journey song. I really don't want to do that, but they've agreed to some other things that I've wanted, so fine, I'll make a fool of myself that way later on. So that's just got to be some of it. Again, you know, I don't know the politics of your team or your group, and sometimes that can work worse than others. I mean, I think one thing, like all of this is heightened, whatever weaknesses were already in the system, and we're seeing that in terms of like racial and socioeconomic inequities, but also within teams, right? Those little like fissures, those little cracks that you could ignore from day to day are harder to now. So I don't know if I ended up being helpful.
We have a question from Jennifer Pava. Sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. How do you implement the exit ticket for your students?
So what I did was, so that was back, that was back here. So having that, I made this as a Google form, and I put the link on that Google Doc that I have where I list all the assignments, the one that all of the teachers have. Like I said, you can update that because it's a Google Doc. So I put the link in there. I said, go back to the thing, go to the website. You know, it's the one-stop shop, and go right there. There was the link to this form. And I remember that's also where they were watching that video that I pre-recorded. And then because it's a Google form, the responses go into a spreadsheet. So I had my Zoom window thrown down. I had the spreadsheet up near the top. And then as responses came in, I was just scanning across, reading what they said the directions were. If they were wrong, I could catch them right away. Just a couple of kids left too early, and I followed up with them by email. So that's the general like implementation. Again, it was the exit ticket, but again, this is like harder to do in the classroom, right? You would collect things and say, okay, you kids just like stand over there while I like read through these, that's probably going to be a problem, or the bell's going to ring, and that's going to be, I could do it more like individually. That's another like sort of potential, like a positive of this digital situation that we're in, that I could say, okay, you stay with me. And of course they want to leave, they want to go do their own thing. So once they were done, I could let them go. Again, in real school, you can't let kids leave the room like 5-10 minutes early because they're done, even though you might like to. Now you can.
So we have, I think this will be our last question as we're running out of time. This is also from Jennifer Clifford. She's wondering if Zoom is optional for teachers in Newton.
So we tried Google Meets first. We tried using Google Meets. We tried that out. I did a couple of those with students. And I'm trying to remember what the issues were with that. One was the grid view was harder to achieve. So you have the extension. There are a couple like things with Google Meet. Again, it's like eons ago in some ways, because Zoom has added a lot of the features that didn't exist before. We now have the waiting room is required, passwords are required, a couple of little gadgets like that as well. So I don't know any teachers who don't use Zoom for their synchronous sessions. So I guess it is, you know, as mandatory as anything is now.
Well, now, Andrew, all of the questions are really just all turning to thank you. And I want to echo that gratitude. I think this was really, really helpful and entertaining, and a reflection of what I'm sure you're like in both your physical classroom and your virtual classroom. David, if there's anything that you want to share as we wrap up, we will have another webinar coming up. So David, maybe you can preview that for the folks who are here today.
Yeah, I just want to thank Andrew as well for the time today, this morning, and for all the preparation for this. You know, you're a veteran teacher in Newton, but you're also very active on social media, and I know you've taken a leading role with the Civics 101 advisory board and are very active in leading the SS chats these days too. So I just wanted to bring those out too, because I think that's important. Those are all ways that you stay current, and you actually lead a lot of those discussions, along with some of the folks who are on this webinar this morning. So I just want to suggest that folks think about participating in some of that as well. There is a Facebook page, and Mass Civics Educators Facebook page, that folks can access through the iCivics website. And you're a regular participant in that, I know. So thank you for your leadership on that front. And thank you for kicking off this this initial webinar on this hot topic. Clearly, everybody's looking for some guidance and about how to do this well. So thank you, Andrew. I do want to invite everybody to our next webinar, which is on the same topic, but from a different angle. The presenter for that will be Pat McGravy, who's an 8th grade educator in North Andover at the middle school there. That's taking place, as you can see on the screen there, on the 21st of this month, same time. And you can register through the Mass Civics for All link there. That's the Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition site. So we hope many of you will be able to participate in that session as well. And Andrew, thanks so much for your session today.
No, thank you. No, we're not, you're not alone. It feels that way, especially on one side of the screen. But the more we put our heads together, the much more likely we are to make through this with our sanity mostly intact, I think.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody. And thank you, Andrew.
No, thanks for setting this up. I'll be there that Thursday.